On October 31st, 2020, Berlin finally opened the airport it had been promising for a generation. The terminal was new, the runways were ready. The name on the building belonged to Willy Brandt, one of the most important political figures in modern German history. But the moment did not feel like triumph, it felt like relief. Because by the time Berlin-Brandenburg Airport opened, the project had missed years of targets, burned through a budget that major reporting described as rising from around 2 billion euros to more than 7 billion, and turned Germany's capital airport into an international punchline. Deutsche Welle reported 7 missed opening dates. It reported around 120,000 defects before the failed 2012 opening. And it reported cable installations so vast, and in some cases so problematic, that the airport became less a symbol of German precision than a warning about what happens when a megaproject loses control of itself. Then came the final irony. After waiting so long for passengers, BER opened in the middle of the COVID aviation collapse, when airports across Europe were half empty and airlines were fighting for survival. So how did the airport meant to reunify Berlin's aviation system become perhaps Europe's most embarrassing airport megaproject? The answer is not one broken smoke fan, one bad contractor, or one politician making one bad call. It is a chain reaction. A political promise became a prestige project. A complex terminal became a moving target. Technical systems failed to integrate. Documentation broke down. Contractors stumbled. Cost climbed. And every new promised opening date made the next failure more public than the last. To understand why BER became so notorious, you have to go back to the Berlin it was supposed to fix. After reunification, Berlin inherited an airport system shaped by the Cold War. Tempelhof sat inside the city with historic weight but limited future capacity. Tegel had become West Berlin's practical workhorse. Schnofeld, outside the old East Berlin, carried a different political and geographic legacy. For a reunited German capital, that arrangement looked outdated. 3 airports meant duplicated infrastructure, complicated planning, and no single modern gateway worthy of a capital city trying to present itself as whole again. In 1996, Berlin-Brandenburg and the federal government decided on the basic answer: expand Schnefeld into a new airport, then close Tegel and Tempelhof. On paper, it made sense. Instead of patching together Cold War fragments, Berlin would have one consolidated airport, a modern terminal, rail under the building, 2 parallel runways. A clean symbol of reunification, but the structure that made the project politically powerful also made it politically exposed. The airport company, FBB, is publicly owned. Berlin and Brandenburg each hold 37%, and the Federal Republic of Germany holds 26%. That ownership gave the project public backing, but it also meant every delay was not just a construction problem. It was a government problem. An airport terminal is not just a building with aircraft parked outside. It is a machine for moving humans safely under regulation. Baggage systems, lifts, signs, fire doors, sprinklers, smoke extraction, alarms, power systems, and passenger flows all have to behave like one organism. If one part is missing, the terminal is not almost ready. It may be legally unusable. That is what made 2012 so damaging. The airport was scheduled to open on June 3, 2012. Airlines had prepared. Passengers expected the change. The old airports were supposed to give way to the future. Then the opening was canceled shortly before launch because operating approval was not granted. The central public crisis was fire safety and smoke extraction. For a normal passenger, that can sound like a technical detail. It is not. In a terminal fire, smoke is often the greater danger. The building must know where the alarm is, move smoke away from escape routes, coordinate ventilation, release doors, guide evacuation, and allow firefighters to understand what is happening. It is not one device, it is a chain. And a chain with broken links cannot be certified just because the marble floors look finished. According to Deutsche Welle's reporting, the problem was not limited to smoke extraction. It described roughly 120,000 defects around the failed opening period, including fire safety problems, automatic doors that did not work as required, sagging roofs, and cable problems. It also reported around 170,000 kilometers of cable installed in and around the airport, with some wiring described as dangerous. Those figures should be treated as reported figures, not as a perfect engineering audit. But they explain why the failure felt so unreal. Berlin had not simply delayed a terminal, it had nearly opened a building that inspectors would not approve. The project was also hit by contractor and management problems. DW reported that an earlier planned opening in 2011 was pushed back with a major contractor bankruptcy as an important reason, and that more contractor trouble followed. It also reported chaotic documentation issues, including later searches for building plans and allegations around plans reportedly turning up in a dumpster. This is why BER's crisis cannot be reduced to one famous fire system. The smoke problem was the visible showstopper, but the deeper failure was project control. Design changes, safety requirements, contractor failures, incomplete documentation, political pressure, and weak oversight created a system where problems did not surface early enough, clearly enough, or honestly enough to prevent a public collapse. The airport was being managed inside a pressure cooker. Politicians needed a symbol. The public wanted an opening. Airlines needed certainty. Contractors needed coordination. Inspectors needed compliance. And the building itself needed reality to matter more than the calendar. Reality won. By the late 2010s, the airport had become a national metaphor. Germany, a country associated internationally with engineering discipline, had a capital airport that could not open. Berlin, a city selling itself as modern and global, was still relying on Tegel and Schneefeld, while its new gateway sat in limbo. And there was another problem waiting underneath. Time had changed the market. BER had been conceived around the needs and assumptions of the 1990s and early 2000s. But Berlin's passenger traffic kept growing while the airport was stuck. In 2019, FBB data shows Berlin's airport system handled about 35.65 million passengers across Tegel and Schönefeld. Tegel alone handled about 24.2 million. DW reported BER's opening design capacity at around 27 million passengers per year. That comparison is not a perfect capacity study, because terminals, expansions, and operating concepts can change. But it captures the embarrassment the airport that opened late was also at risk of opening too small for the city it was meant to serve. Then COVID changed everything in the cruelest possible way. The capacity problem did not disappear because BER had solved it. It disappeared because demand collapsed. On October 31st, 2020, BER finally opened. On November 8th, Tegel handled its last commercial departure, an Air France flight to Paris, and Berlin's long era of split airport operations effectively ended. But instead of proving itself under normal traffic, BER began life in an aviation crisis. Airlines had cut routes. Passenger numbers were depressed. Terminals across the world felt hollow. The airport had waited years for the crowd. When it finally opened, the crowd was gone. That pandemic context shaped the early operation. The old Schneefeld terminal became BRE Terminal 5, but in February 2021 it was closed because traffic had fallen so sharply. FBB said concentrating traffic would save about 25 million euros per year. By the end of 2022, the supervisory board decided Terminal 5 would not reopen. So the airport that had once been mocked for potentially being too small opened into a world where it had to close capacity to save money. That is the kind of irony only a delayed infrastructure project can produce. And yet it would be inaccurate to say BER is simply a failed airport today. This is where the story needs precision. BER did open. It operates. Berlin's old commercial airport map was finally consolidated. Passenger numbers recovered after the pandemic. FBB reported positive operating EBITDA for the first time in the BER era in 2023, with later reporting showing stronger results. BER handled about 25.5 million passengers in 2024, and FBB reported about 26.1 million in 2025. The airport also received a Skytrax 4-star rating and a World's Most Improved Airport recognition in 2025, according to FBB's chronology. Those facts matter because they prevent the easy but false ending. BER is not an abandoned ghost airport. It is not sitting empty as a monument to total operational failure. The real failure was the delivery saga. It was the gap between ambition and control, between public promise and technical readiness, between political ceremony and the invisible systems that make an airport legal, safe, and usable. The lesson of Brandenburg is that megaprojects do not collapse only when someone makes one catastrophic decision. They can also collapse slowly through thousands of small mismatches. A changed design here, a missing document there, a contractor failure, a rushed deadline. An oversight board hearing too late, a safety system that cannot be certified, a budget that grows because delay itself becomes a cost. In aviation, that matters more than almost anywhere else. Airports are not monuments. They are regulated machines with passengers inside them. You can sell the renderings, you can announce the date, you can print the tickets, you can invite the cameras, but until the systems work together, the airport is still just an expensive building beside a runway. Berlin wanted BR to be the airport that closed the Cold War chapter and proved the capital had finally become whole. Instead, for years, it proved something much more uncomfortable. A giant project can have the money, the land, the political backing, and the national importance to succeed, and still fail publicly if no one can make complexity obey the deadline. That is why Berlin-Brandenburg became so embarrassing. Not because Germany could not build an airport, but because it showed the world that even a country famous for precision can lose control of a machine too complex to bluff.